Welcome to Seat at the Table, where we believe technical skills will get you in the room, but your soft skills and business acumen will earn you a seat. My name is Jarek Beeson, and I am the host. We are seeking to have candid conversations with leaders across all verticals, all industries, diving into topics that will prepare and equip cybersecurity leaders by extracting the hard-earned lessons from the experience that each of our guests bring to the show. Today, we have Sarah Urbanowicz. I'm especially excited for this conversation because Sarah is the person who lured me away from consulting. People always ask me, where did I learn? Where did I get my insights from? And the answer is simple. In addition to an exorbitant amount of reading, I have the privilege of being around some amazing leaders. Sarah, hands down, is one of those leaders. So many aspects of how I approach my CISO role today, both tactically and strategically, are the results of what she imparted on me, as well as some of the things I observed seeing her in action. Sarah, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jarek. I'm so glad to be here.
Oh, not as glad as I am. Please take a moment to share your background and your path to CIO with our audience.
Okay, I'll sure do that. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. I, like many of you, came up in and around security for many years. I actually started out as an IT auditor. I did 1.5 years at a big 4 firm, but I think we say those are generally measured in dog years because you just get a whole lot of experience in a short amount of time. Jarek knows. So that 1.5 years translates to maybe like 7 years, right? So I did a brief stint as an IT auditor, and I really fell into security in my first job out of consulting. And back then, what really security meant was a lot of posters, a little bit of application security, and a whole lot of Control-Alt-Delete when you're away from your seat. That was about as deep as we went then. The idea of nation states was something just for TV. We didn't know at the time that was actually happening sort of in and around us. So all that to say, my entry into security goes some time back, but I've been in and around it for more years than I care to add up, about 20 at this point. And I came into my most recent company, I'm with AECOM now, as the CISO. Reporting to the CIO at the time. We went through several shifts in org structure and what we did with security. We can touch on that a little bit today. But suffice it to say, I've been here about 5 years, and the last 2 years as CIO, and the previous 3 as the CISO here at AECOM.
From auditor to CISO to CIO.
That's right. That's right. And CIO was never in my sights. I had no intention, no desire whatsoever to aspire to be here, but I'm glad to be here now that I am.
I remember when you were saying it was even a possibility, and my mind was blown because that's just not a path you see people taking these days.
I get that a lot. My mind was kind of blown too.
So the show is about getting a seat at the table, and you didn't just get a seat, you got the seat. And so many people want to know, how did she do it, right? I was thinking about some of the things that we could talk about, and there are just so many things you've said to me that I remember So I think we should talk about some of the things that you said that really kind of left a mark on me.
Oh boy. Okay. Let's
All
do that.
right. So let's see. I remember you saying on multiple occasions that you won't be a chicken little CISO. Can you elaborate on what you meant by that and share how you think that perspective has helped you throughout your career?
I can. I hope everyone knows the story of Chicken Little. It's probably been a while since any of us heard that or told that to our children. So Chicken Little, if you recall, went and told everybody that the sky was falling. It was a doomsday scenario. It was the end of times, when in reality, a little acorn had fallen on his or her head. I don't know if Chicken Little was a his or her, but whatever, on their head. And you can imagine fear and panic sort of spread throughout all the little farmyard friends. So that's the gist of Chicken Little. So why do I say I would be a Chicken Little CISO? I guess a couple of things. The first is your words as a CISO mean something. They mean a lot, in particular to people who might be outside of our domain or our area of expertise, the CEO, board members, really any non-technical or non-IT stakeholders. So just a lot of times it's your tone, it's your behavior, it's how much panic you seem to have a sense of is where they're going to take their cue. So I would say, in saying I don't want to be a Chicken Little CISO, I want to be cognizant of, what level of alarm I'm raising, would be the first thing. Certainly always be honest, certainly always be direct and communicate a sense of urgency when it's needed, but just making sure that you're aware that people are following your tone. And then the other thing that I think I take from that story, and I think we all know this, all risk is relative, right? Even including in cyber. And so again, the example of saying the sky is falling when what you really meant was an acorn was falling on my head, just being cognizant of that. Both events can be painful. So a small incident or a blossoming incident, if you will, within cyber can turn into a bigger thing, but being aware of what you're saying and what they're hearing. Really what I mean by that.
So I have the fortune of knowing that some of the security programs that you took over, they had their fair share of areas for improvement. Mm-hmm. How do you balance knowing that there are all these things to fix, but at the same time only distilling a certain amount of information that was most relevant and most prudent for the leaders?
Yeah, that is a perfect sort of segue from the Chicken Little thing, right? So look, we do this for a living. So we can walk into, especially those of us that have been doing it a long time, we can walk in and get the lay of the land and go, wow, there's, as you put it, a lot of opportunity here. But that's relative. It doesn't mean the sky is falling. It doesn't mean that no work has come before you. I think that's a really, really important thing to remember anytime you're coming in somewhere as a new CISO. In particular, there was somebody there before you, and the odds are they did a whole lot of work to improve, to hand you what you've maybe inherited. So just sort of keeping that perspective and lay of the land, so that when you are communicating, it's exactly what you said. There's areas where we can improve. That doesn't mean there's nothing here. That doesn't mean nothing came before you. It means exactly what you said, and I think communicating that clearly is important.
Another thing that you used to say was, and I hope I can say this on YouTube, but I'll never forget it. You said, "I will manage the budget to the gnat's ass." I'll never forget that phrase. And I saw you do this firsthand, but it'd be helpful if you could share what that means and maybe provide some practical guidance on how others can do the same.
Yeah, is that a universal colloquialism? I don't even know. So
I don't think it is.
A gnat is a very tiny insect. And so its rear end, you can imagine, is also very small. So saying that you do anything to the gnat's ass, at least as I was brought up, means doing it with an incredible amount of precision and fidelity. So again, a little context there as to what that is. So why that's the case. Look, we know that we are technologists. We know that we have a risk role to play. We know that, and generally our stakeholders and our executive teams know that. But I think it is possible to sometimes lose sight of the fact that we are also, an equally important part of our role is as a business partner. And so it's very difficult to be a good business partner to the business if you're not being a good steward of the budgets and the finances that we've been entrusted with. And the real, I think, point there is it comes back to credibility. You can't look me in the face and tell me as a CISO, again, who understands all of this technical cyber stuff that's happening behind the scenes that maybe other people don't. You can't look me in the face and tell me that you've made an informed and a reasonable investment decision if you don't have the bigger context, if you don't know exactly what you're spending, how much you're spending, and what you're spending it on. So we're really good at measuring, our security controls back to a framework, back to a NIST framework. But can you tell me what you're spending on any particular domain in cyber? Maybe some can, some can't. But it really is about credibility. And it's such a simplistic example, but I've actually used it with others in my executive team. Presumably, you're not going to spend $10 million on a safe for your home to put $1 million worth of jewels in. Same holds true, right, for us at work. And if you're not managing your budget to the gnat's ass, to be able to know where your ins and outs are, it's difficult for you to, again, look me in the face and tell me that you have that in hand.
So let's go deeper on this, because I think the way we handle money is a underappreciated skill set for new security leaders. So let's talk about budget management to a degree. So first thing you talked about is if you want to make a request for something. What about just the day-to-day operational management of the budget? Do you see that as a skill set that has helped you in any way, shape, or form, or do you think it was just a part of the job?
I do think it's helped tremendously, but I will say this: if you're good with numbers, if you like numbers, if you're comfortable in that space, great, you have a leg up. If you're not, that is okay too. Get someone on your team who does. So it's not that you have to be, the next CFO. I by no means am in that boat. My CFO has to sort of draw stick figures for me sometimes to, explain working capital and other more advanced concepts. So I don't claim to be that. I do like numbers. I am good with numbers. I like math, so that helps. But I don't think that it's necessary that you inherently have. I think that the important takeaway is the numbers matter a lot, and you having an understanding, whether that's innately because you do it yourself or because you have a trusted individual on your team. I stress that. I don't think that it's wise to rely on an external finance team. They're very, very helpful in sort of rolling up and managing, but I really think you need somebody on your team and a seat at your table to help you understand exactly what the numbers say.
I've seen you walk this out, day after day. One of the things noted is you spent some time helping me and my peers also do the same thing. Now, was that to make your life easier, or was that for some other reason?
That was for, candidly, that was for development for the people. So I would love to do the numbers. I'm a kind of a math nerd, or at least a number nerd. I would love to do that stuff myself. I do sometimes do that stuff myself, but gosh, you're making me blush now because look at you. Clearly you've, but there was a time, right, when it was newer for you and we were working on sort of that development, and no, it was for you because I knew, well, I darn sure knew that you would leapfrog me and go bigger places someday, which has happened. But I knew that would be a very important skill. And it's just not one that a lot of, technical focused people have. And in my humble opinion, it can make or break you, because it's really where your credibility comes from.
I agree. If you get the numbers wrong, if you overspend, if you project wild numbers, you're going to lose that credibility, and you're not going to really have many opportunities to continue to go back to the well.
That's right.
Speaking of credibility, another thing that you used to always say is that you were going to fiercely guard your credibility. How do you think that you do that sitting in the chair of a CISO?
So I know you picked that one from having worked with me, because you're right. Those are words directly from my mouth.
I say it all the time too now. So
it's important. It's important. It takes time to build credibility. No matter, and I think that's important. If you're new to a company or you're new in your role, the first thing I'll say about credibility is it can be frustrating, because you're good and you can do this and you're experienced, and you come in either new to a company or new to a role, and it can be frustrating because don't you guys know that I'm perfectly capable and I can do this? Credibility doesn't come from a piece of paper, and it doesn't come from, it has to be built. It can be built a little bit quicker if you're really good at what you do, but it has to be built. And so it does take some time to do that, but damn, it can be destroyed in an instant. It can be destroyed in an instant. So my saying that I fiercely guard it is, let's not undo all of the progress and work that it's not just about me. It's very little about me. It's that we as a team. It used to be we as a security team. Now it's we as an IT organization. Let's not undo or destroy that. right? Because we were moving too fast, or we weren't thoughtful or deliberate in our choices or in our messaging, because it can be destroyed pretty quickly.
So let's double tap on credibility. And if
Okay.
this is too tough of a question, feel free to tap out.
Okay.
Some may view guarding your credibility as playing it safe,
Mm.
but when it comes to security, playing it safe isn't necessarily the way that we need to go, because we have to be aggressive when it comes to stopping the bad guys. How do you balance the dichotomy of those two things?
Yeah, so I won't tap out on that at all. I think that's actually an excellent question. I don't think that those are one and the same. So being credible does not mean avoiding a hard conversation or decision. On the contrary, my advice on guarding your credibility would be, don't ever avoid the hard conversations. And sometimes we do have to guess, and sometimes we aren't sure, and sometimes the risk is not quantifiable, and sometimes we have to be aggressive or go fast or what. That's okay. Part of guarding your credibility is have that honest and hard conversation. Don't placate it, don't sugarcoat it, right? Have it honest. So I don't think they're mutually exclusive by any means. And in fact, I would say going hard, going aggressive, doubling down sometimes is part of what makes you credible. But I'll say this, Jerk, I think this is important. When the time comes, when you have to show up and have the hard conversation, if you have the credibility, they listen, right? If you're Chicken Little and everything's always a big deal, you're going to show up and they're not going to listen. If you're the opposite, if everything's always sunshine and roses and you haven't had the hard conversations, same thing happens. When things go south, it's not going to end well. So it really is about being direct and honest and transparent, but with that right balance.
Yeah, I love that, and I agree with everything you said. One last question on credibility, because I think it's a currency that we need if we're going to be effective as CISOs. Do you spend more time focusing on building your credibility or guarding it?
Guarding it.
Because once you build it, you already have it, right?
That's right.
Just
That's
build
right.
it, don't lose it.
That's right. And look, it took time to build it. It wasn't overnight. But you'll know when, and it's not a black and white thing, obviously. I'm sure there's some days that you ask any of my peers, my leadership team, they're like, we're questioning that today, Sarah. So it's not a black or white thing, but you'll know, I believe, and again, this is dependent on you and your peers and your leadership team and your company and your culture and all those things, but you'll know when you have it. You'll be invited not just into different conversations, you'll be invited into conversations in a different way, maybe than you were before, you'd been tested. You'll know when you have it. And so, yeah, I definitely spend more time guarding it now.
So I'm sorry, I have to ask more questions on credibility. This is just for my own knowledge here. You're guarding something that you built. If you look back in your current role or previous roles, can you think of things that you've done to actually build credibility?
Yeah, I could. Hard messages is one thing that I've done. People really focus on board presentations, I find. Like, I don't know about you, but
yeah,
you couldn't go to a conference or a this or that without one of the topics being how to talk to the board. Let me not diminish that. I completely understand that. It is a scary thing to do, and that is the word I choose. If you've never done it before, it is a scary thing to walk in and have that audience, and I am completely respectful of that space. But there is so much coaching and teaching about going into sort of how you present to the board, bringing authenticity, maybe an overused buzzword these days, but I think perfectly appropriate for this particular question and topic. Bringing authenticity, hands down, is the thing that I have done above and beyond everything else to build credibility. Usually you can tell when someone's BSing, right? You smell it a mile away. And so just being authentic, whether it's good news, bad news, or somewhere in between, can't go wrong with being honest and direct about it.
I completely agree. And, being a millennial, my authentic self looks a lot different than, a boomer or a Gen Xer. And I'm wearing a hoodie right now as I interview a CIO. I don't think there's a better embodiment of that. but it doesn't take away anything. In fact, people know
No, it
exactly
doesn't.
what they're going to get.
Yeah.
I think it's funny that you bring up board communications because your husband, I'm going to put a plug in for the SANS Leadership Summit. Last year, his presentation was on board reporting and how to demystify it.
It was.
Yeah.
I forgot about that. Yeah.
You know, if I could summarize everything that you said, and I usually say this about trust, but I say trust is gained in drops and lost in buckets.
Mm-hmm.
I think the same could be said about credibility.
Completely. They're one and the same. I mean, they're not entirely one and the same, but there's a huge amount of overlap. I mean, there is trust and credibility are two different things, but I couldn't agree more. How to get it, how to keep it, how to guard it, very much one and the same.
Awesome. All right, so the end of our show, usually we ask the CIO or the CISO, whoever's on the other end of the microphone, to share a analogy or metaphor that they use to communicate something technical to a non-technical audience.
Now, Jarek, you know analogies are my love language. I think you say you end with this, but I feel sure you picked this for me. I mean, it's so simple, but the simple ones are effective. I use, as you know, I use a lot of them. I use a lot of analogies. Yeah. I think anything that ties back to physical security is still, because this has been the case for a long time, is still super helpful in cyber. It resonates with anybody. There's nobody that you'll come across who doesn't understand the concept of protecting themselves or their family or their home or their car. So it's a really good starting point. And then, oh my God, I could go on for days, like defense in depth, identity management, like all of it, you know. I did use one recently. This is so embarrassing because they're kind of lame when you say them out loud, but they work for identity management. So if you go back, which is not one you typically have to sort of explain a lot of technical stuff, but if you go back, I don't know, I'm going to say 20, 30 years, the home analogy, right? You would answer the door anytime somebody rang your doorbell. You might not trust what they had to say, but if the doorbell rang, you answer the door. Now, you check your ring.
Yeah.
You may or may not even go to the door. You might ask some questions. Hell, you might judge just based on what you see. I'm not even gonna respond. Is there a vehicle out front that I could go on? I won't. I love the home security physical analogy because I just think it resonates personally with people and it helps connect dots. So that's probably one of my favorites, but I use a lot.
I love that, and I'll use one that I'm working on. So this may be really rough and really bad, but it's an identity one. Okay. A long time ago, when you would go to buy alcohol, they would ask you to show your ID, and they would just verify that your picture was you, maybe your age, and that was enough. Now they check to make sure you have the right hair color. They check to make sure that you have the right eye color. They make sure that's not a fake ID. And that's a lot like what multi-factor authentication is. It's looking for multiple different factors all from the same individual. It could be a little bit better, but I'm thinking I'm gonna use that one day.
I'll take it. I might end up stealing it. I'll give you credit if I do this.
Thank you, Sarah. This has been awesome. It's a pleasure. I mean, we've known each other for a while. We work together as in the consultancy and then back again, in business. And I am honored that you came on my show and shared some of your insights with our audience.
Thank you, Jarek. I'm honored that you asked, and I mean that. Thank you very much for having me.